गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट में आप सबको दोबारा स्वागत है। राइट, आज हम बात करने वाले हैं एक बहुत
Listen, your voice is coming garbled.
या आज हम बात करने वाले हैं एक बहुत ही विशेष सब्जेक्ट के ऊपर। वो है थिएटराइजेशन। आर वी थिएटराइज राइट राइट आर वी थिएटराइजिंग, ये है हमारा विषय आज के लिए। और इसके साथ इसके बारे में बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं लेफ्टिनेंट जनरल प्रकाश मेनन। पहले मैं उनको सर वेलकम टू द शो, थैंक्स अ
Thank
लॉट
you.
फॉर कमिंग। बोलिए।
So, thank you very much, Shankar.
थैंक्स अ लॉट सर, थैंक्स फॉर कमिंग। इससे पहले आई मीन आई स्पीक इन Hindi and English because our audience is mixed. It's up to you to choose whichever language you want to choose, so you be comfortable with it. And if you're speaking too much of English, I'll translate it. If you're speaking too much of Hindi, I'll translate it into English. So that's okay. They leave that to me. Having said that, मैं सबको जो यहाँ हमें देखने के लिए आए हैं और ये to listen to this topic, I would like to tell you something about General Prakash Menon. General Prakash Menon was the commandant NDC, National Defense College, when I was doing the NDC. To that extent ये हमारे गुरु हैं। और उस और तो और जब ये रिटायर हुए थे, he was part of the NSA's secretariat. He was the military advisor to the national security advisor of that time. और कुछ दिन के बाद ये न्यूक्लियर कमांड अथॉरिटी में भी थे और उन्होंने किताब लिखा है ऑन न्यूक्लियर इश्यूज बिटवीन इंडिया एंड पाकिस्तान। और हमारे जो सर्कल्स हैं, इन आवर सर्कल्स ही इज नोन टू बी एन इंटेलेक्चुअल, राइट? एंड आई हैव ऑलवेज लुक्ड अप टू हिम फॉर एडवाइस। And I must tell you that when I started Gunner Shot, he was the first one who said, just go on, bash on regardless. So thanks for that great piece of motivation. Right, today we'll talk of theaterization. I would like to put across a few issues before I hand it over to you. जैसे आपको पता है, on 15th August 2019, हमारा प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब ने गवर्नमेंट का डिसीजन इतला किया रेड फोर्ट से कि चीफ ऑफ डिफेंस स्टाफ का पद नियुक्त किया उन्होंने। और उन्होंने ये बोला, जो नीचे लिखा हुआ है, द सब्जेक्ट एक्सपर्ट्स ऑन द इशू हैव बीन डिमांडिंग दिस फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम। ये तो इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है। टुडे वी हैव डिसाइडेड दैट वी विल नाउ हैव द चीफ ऑफ डिफेंस स्टाफ, CDS, and after formation of this post, all three forces will get effective leadership at the top level. और भी है, right? Okay. इसके अलावा एक मैंडेट निकला फॉर द, उसके साथ साथ CDS के पोस्ट के साथ उन्होंने एक डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ मिलिट्री अफेयर्स भी नियुक्त किया। और ये मैंडेट ऑफ द डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ मिलिट्री अफेयर्स वो मोटे मोटे तौर पर promoting jointness in procurement, training, and staffing for the services through joint planning and integration of their requirements. Facilitation of restructuring military commands. Right. For optimal utilization of resources by bringing about jointness in theaters. Lalta, just give Prakash Menon a ring, he's gone off. Right. Facilitation of restructuring, he seems to have gone off. We'll just give him a call. Facilitation of restructuring of military commands for optimal utilization of resources by bringing about jointness in operations. Yeah, he's back.
I'm sorry, I think
No,
I
no,
lost.
no
I just moved to my phone.
No problem, sir. No issue. So we are talking of the second thing, which is the critical part of the mandate: facilitation of restructuring of military commands for optimal utilization of resources by bringing about jointness in operations, including establishment of joint theatre commands. That was a mandate. This was in 2019. And bringing about jointness in operations, logistics, transport, training, support services, etc., etc., etc. And this was all to be done within 3 years of the first CDS assuming office. Well, as we all know, the first CDS did a lot. Unfortunately, he died in a tragic accident. And after that, for 8 months, we never had a CDS, and now we have a CDS. The 8 months, the 3 years of the CDS being instituted has also gone. We don't have training commands. We are aspiring to be a regional power. China on our northern borders has already shifted into the theater command mode and is now trying for a global role through their restructured thing. And they seem to be functioning with all guns firing. And of course, not to mention of USA. We are still stuck. We are still stuck. The news which has just come 2 3 days back in the recent combined commanders conference, uh, I believe a decision has been taken that three theater commands will be instituted, and they will be coming in till about 2024-25. But we'll see how it goes, because this is not official; it is only hearsay. Now, what we are going to do, and what I'll request General Prakash Menon, right? आप कृपया बताएं, why do you need theater commands? Why does India need theater commands? What are the
As
problems in this theater commands? And then what progress have we made so far? And then what are your views on how they should come in or not? So over to you.
Thank you, Shankar. The theater commanders commands are needed because it would actually be we use the concept that large structures, large theaters can actually facilitate flexible cooperation, and that means in large numbers. And that's possible because if you orient your theaters towards the threat and terrain, then you could have theaters where resources can be pre-located, but it's also capable of being moved from one theater to another in a flexible manner. Today we have a structure in which we have about 17 separate service commands. It's overlaps in jurisdiction, it is difficult to coordinate, and it is also not the optimal way of using resources. And most importantly, it does not promote what is required in any modern war, the issue of jointness, that we have to have the ability to plan and execute war jointly. And though three services operate in three different spaces of the land, sea, and air, they cannot be viewed separately. In fact, this realization was there even after the Kargil War. And that is why the recommendation of the Kargil Committee was to create a Chief of Defense Staff. And as you know, among the recommendations which was not put into effect was the creation of the CDS. In fact, there was this group of retired Air Force chiefs who went to Prime Minister Vajpayee and said that this is not a good idea. And instead, what came about was the headquarter IDS, which had which has a CISC, which is what is prevailing now, but it was a suboptimal arrangement. The armed forces had no presence or presence worth its name in the MOD, and therefore, when the government of India created the CDS this time, it also created a department of military affairs called the DMA in the MOD, and then shifted a lot of responsibilities from the defense secretary, from the defense department to the DMA. So the point is that the CDS, who has to wear, in fact, four hats, one of the CDS and has an advisory capacity, one as the head of the DMA, and then as the permanent chairman of what is now the Chief of Staff's committee, and he is also in the Nuclear Command Authority, where as a CDS, he advises the Nuclear Command Authority. These are all different hats. So the question now is, he was mandated, as General Shankar mentioned, to create theater commands with a view to improve jointness and optimal use of resources. Unfortunately, because of General Bipin Rawat's untimely and tragic demise, the whole process has been delayed. And if the news, as he just broke, that there is a structure which has already been in an advanced stage of approval and includes 3 theater commands, then I think it's a very good sign, because 3 theater commands, I would assume, would have 2 continental theaters and 1 maritime theater.
Yes, sir.
And I would,
What has come out is that there'll be a Western theater which will look after Pakistan completely. There'll be a Northern theater, call it Northern, Eastern, whatever it is, but it will look after the China border completely. And there'll be a maritime command which will look after everything, maritime, like you rightly said.
yeah, but my issue with this 3 theater commands is that eventually India, a responsibility for the hinterland has also to be given within these theaters. The theaters must encompass the hinterland. So if you give the maritime theater, uh, make it into a single maritime theater command, then they would probably be having to control all south of the Vindhyas in terms of the states, because the boundaries will have
Yes,
to be
sir.
drawn by states, and that would be a little too much to handle both these. Instead, maybe the better way of doing it was actually to bifurcate it, where Eastern and Western Command's responsibility now lies, and incorporate the integrated Andaman Nicobar Command within the Eastern Command. But be that as it may, it fulfills, the 3 theaters fulfill one large conceptual idea, which is, the larger the theater, the ability to cooperate, flexibility is much more. There is no doubt. But my issue with that is about the command and control primarily of the hinterland, and of the fact that the maritime theater, and if we are actually have to look beyond the Malaccas, would actually be fairly large. It would have the complete naval responsibility which is there, and that means that it will probably have to be controlled. The theater will have to be controlled from Delhi, and could not be controlled either from Bombay or in Vizag, where the 2 command theaters are. So that would actually be a problem. But I'm sure the people who are doing this
Yeah,
would
I'm
probably.
sure, sir. In fact,
Uh,
I personally had a view. I must put it across to you, long back when this point was even being spoken of. I thought a Eastern Command, Western Command, uh, Maritime Command, and probably a Reserve Command. when I say reserve command, look after the hinterland and internal issues. Take your nuclear assets in there. Take all your, in fact, I thought take all your out of area contingency assets, because those many times won't come under the nuclear maritime, sorry, might not even come under the maritime command. And they would have given us the flexibility of using the air force more dynamically, because that reserve command could have kept a certain amount of air force within it. And there is a lot of air force in the center of our country, so it would have. But I have no crib with it, because at least something is moving
No, no,
within the
but
wall.
my point is like this. If the Maritime Command's responsibility is on the shoreline, you see, the Maritime Command must also be in charge of the hinterland, because you cannot actually divorce these two things, especially with the fact that a lot of assets which will be used in the maritime theater will actually be based in the hinterland. So that's the you lose that the contiguous nature of the continental space and the maritime space cannot have a boundary, preferably should not have a boundary which separates two theaters at the shoreline. So there is a problem of
Uh,
coordination will come in later. And as far
I
as the
don't
reserve
think the
is concerned,
I don't think the issues of the shoreline, sir. I think the people are very clear that the shoreline is not a boundary. They're
then what
calling it
is
a
the boundary?
maritime they're
What is the
calling it a
boundary
maritime command. I think it would cover the hinterland, because look, sir, what I'm putting across to you is also hearsay. It's not come out in black and white. Nothing is come out in
Oh,
black and white. No announcement is made. Nothing.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So to that extent, I would give it to them that as and when they make these commands, they'll make it equitably so that the hinterland is also covered.
You see, the hinterland will still have to have the area commanders who will be
And
part of the
of
land
the
component commander of the theater,
I
because
agree
each of
with you on
but the reserve command, the problem with the reserve command is we don't have the type of resources which we need to create a separate reserve command. The
at this point
point
of
will
time.
be, the point will be conceptually, because of our lack of resources, we have to adhere to the point that nobody owns any asset, owns it. They are temporary custodians of it. And
Yeah, I agree with you on
when
that.
it has to be shifted, it must be shifted. So the
Right.
point is that the reserve is kept at the much larger level. So I think we need to actually look at one of the things which comes out in this is that the CDS, who has now got all these various hats to wear, in my view, will be a little overburdened,
Yeah.
and therefore he has to be the CDS, which means he is the advisor, main advisor to the RM and to the CCS if necessary. And then he has to be also the permanent chairman, joint chief of staff. I would think that the better way is to give the DMA to either a serving 3-star CNC or a retired 3-star officer who can be head of the DMA.
So
Now, the
my
point is,
one request, sir. One request.
yeah,
One request. I would request don't get into too many intricacies, because people who are listening to us might not even know that what
okay,
issues you are
right,
bringing up.
okay, all right.
Right? Because I mean, I've read your article. I am in agreement with it. There has to be a restructuring of the higher defense organization. There's no two ways about it. You have to make the CDS lean and free the CDS to so that he attends to higher things. But I would, I leave it at that. So, but I would like to put across a few other issues. No, it's always a chicken and egg story: jointness first or theaterization first.
No, I don't think we can look at it like in a linear form. That is not the issue here.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
cannot be looked, should not be looked linear.
So, if you could speak on that, because let people
Okay, right.
understand that both these have to go together. I mean, I don't have a doubt. I would like you to clarify on that.
Yeah. So actually, the point is that the theater commander is the one responsible for the execution of the operational directives, which will come from the what is now the chief of staff's committee, which will have to be structured as what I in my paper, which Takshila brought out in in June 2020. We call it actually the uh, it will be the Joint Commanders Staff Committee,
Okay.
CJSC, in which you would have the permanent chairman, chief of staff. That means who's the CDS wearing the hat of permanent chairman, chief of staff. You would have the three chiefs there, and you would have the theater commanders, whether they're 3 or 4 or 5, whatever. So that would be the equivalent of what today is existing as the chief of staff's committee. And they are responsible for giving out and issuing the operational directives to the theaters. The theater commander then fulfills those operational directives, and this chief of staff, the joint chief commanders staff committee also allocates, moves resources, makes it available to the theater command depending upon what directives have been given to them. So when you look at it from the top, the CDS first plays the advisory role of the RM, which means he, along with the RM and the secretary of the DMA, is at the policy level. That is where policy has to be formulated. And where does this policy comes from? It in long-term planning, it comes from the RM's directive, which is supposed to come from the national security strategy, but we don't have it. But the RM's directive will therefore remain something which will have to come from the will have to be orchestrated by the CDS through the commanders committee, which replaces the COC, through the DMA, and then get it approved by the RM. But this is a planning. This is the long-term planning one. It is not. It is insufficient for the planning process to be left there. Eventually, when it comes to operations, then even then the policy formulation will have to be done jointly by the CDS in an advisory role, by him wearing the other hat of the Joint Chief of Staff Committee, and the with the head of the DMA. So the policy level is what comes from the MOD as such. At the level of the Joint Chief of Staff, they formulate military strategy. So policy will dictate strategy, and from strategy, operational directives will be given to the theater commanders. And theater commanders will then carry out according to what their directives are.
Right.
And for that, the theaters will have to be organized with integrated formations, but not necessarily everything can be integrated. But I would think that a theater, in a normal thing, a theater would have even under the not only the theaters, even under the commanders joint commanders committee, there would be 3 component commanders, which means they are all the 3 services. There will be a space, there will be a cyber, and so on. And special forces. They would all be directly under the highest chief of staff committee equivalent, the joint commanders committee.
Yeah.
And a similar structure would actually be there in the theaters also. Right? So they will be responsible for allocation of resources. So when we talk about this, we must be careful to distinguish between the planning stage and the operational stage. The planning stage is obviously about getting political guidance through the RM's directive, deciding what you want to buy, what you want to develop. That's the planning stage. But when it comes to operations, then it's about allocating resources that you now have, which has to be used for operations.
Yeah. So that the theater commander is able to execute the task allotted to him.
Yeah. So one issue which has come up is that it is said, and I'm that from various sources, that it is mentioned there that the CDS will have no operational role. Okay, that is true if he's a CDS, but as long as he is the permanent chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff's Committee, there is no way that you can take him out of the operational role, because although he might be just giving directives and he does not command troops directly, but you can't say that he does not have an operation role. That, I think, is something which we need to understand, because it is, I believe in the CCS note, it is mentioned that the CDS will not have. I would agree with that. Only
Uh,
as when he wears this hat does he have it.
oh, that is there, sir. I think somewhere in the mandates given, and it's come out officially that he'll have no operational role, and that he's more of an advisory role, and right.
As
But
CDS, not as
serious.
permanent, not as permanent chairman, which means
No,
he will be
no, no.
the
What
chairman.
that is what the point I'm trying to make is once the you have to get out of this knot. Who is the theater commander responsible to?
They
Is the
will be
theater
responsible. Yeah.
1 minute? The will the theater commander be responsible directly to the RM? Will the theater commander, which is the actually the American model, will the theater commander be responsible to the Central Military Commission, which is a Chinese model, or will the theater commander be responsible to this chief of staff's committee or joint chief of staff committee, whichever way it is? Right? Now that is something which we have to be very clear of,
Yeah.
right?
So
Can I
I
have
would.
your
That's
views
what I'm
on that?
saying.
Because
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, please, sir.
What I'm saying is that in the system which has so far been done, that as long as the CDS is the permanent chairman, which he'll be chairman
Chief of staff.
joint
What
commanders
about
committee. As long as he's there, then the theater commanders have to be responsible to that body, nobody else.
nobody
And
else?
yes,
That
that
means
I think will have to be clear.
that means the whether irrespective of what others think, the CDS will eventually have to have an operational role.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That he as see he's the CCS node makes him the permanent chairman of the COSC.
Yeah,
Well,
there's a anomaly,
so that no, but I would think that you can interpret it in the way that as CDS he does not have an operation role. He has a
but
role when he wears a hat of the permanent chairman. So
permanent
that's
chief.
the interpretation. I think we
Right,
could do that. So the
right.
question really is that the why it did not come about till now was obviously the objections from the Indian Air Force itself, who feel that we don't have the resources, everything has to be centralized, and therefore it has to be used centralized. Well, they have a point. I don't think anybody can dispute that. But the question is not about whether that is the issue now. The issue now is the theater commands and the joint commands, or whatever you want to call it, are already politically mandated. When this comes about, then how does the Air Force assets be handled? How will they operate? Under whom will they operate? In fact, there will be a Air Force component commander under the Chiefs of Staff's committee, which will be part of what I in my paper call it the joint operations staff, which means with the merger of all the three operations department of the three services, and it will have two VCDSs. One is looking after
Yeah,
operations,
that's
one
okay.
after.
We'll
Okay, so the
the,
point is that the theater commander would be part of a committee which he himself is, when the directions are given, is also part of the decision making. He is not somebody who gets decision without his voice being heard in that, because he is now part of that committee. So that the important part, and there's absolutely nothing wrong if the RM tells the joint commanders committee and have a meeting with a particular theater commander. So in fact, this joint commanders committee, depending upon the issue being discussed, can call in anybody they want for
that's
where
fine. Yeah,
so it's a flexible thing. I mean, their members, they need not be members. They can all be called in. So the point at issue is that the theater, which you said, is to be conceptualized first, is basic structure has to be worked out. And then how do you move from where you are to to now fulfill those structures? That is a major transition which will definitely take time. It
yes.
will take a lot of planning, and I don't think there is anybody in the armed forces or even outside who have this sort of experience, because merging so many things, the only people who had this in principle similar experience but not at the scale which we are talking about has been when the corporate sector moved from their separate verticals to what you call strategic business units. There is a
Yeah, same.
commonality there. So I mean, there is enough brains in this country. We can actually source it from anybody, and we can actually make this happen. But first, we'll have to plan. We'll have to see how it is to be done, not by suddenly declaring that there will be an air defense
No,
command,
no,
there will be a logistics command. That's not
that's
our
not the
issue.
way to go about it. In fact, I would visualize that there should be a group or a study committee or an empowered committee formed who will give a roadmap as to how to convert, right? First and foremost, I think this committee has to actually outline what the theater should consist of and what should be the final, akar of these theaters, if I may put it. And then you'll have to say, okay, if this is the outline of these theaters, and today where we are, what is the roadmap for this transformation,
Yeah.
right?
So actually, the geographic responsibilities and the threat responsibilities are the ones which we need clarity, and we need theater boundaries to be done. That is the first structure which we need to have. Now, how do we make this transition? Because don't forget, this transition is being made when geopolitical the threats are already at our door. You can't be imbalanced, and that is the major challenge which we are going to face if you're going to actually integrate without actually thinking it through. So this is a matter of detail. The fact is, there are a lot of studies which have been done during Bipin Rawat's time, and some of those studies are now actually found life again, I'm told, and it's waiting to be done. But I think the first thing is to get the basic structure and which theater is responsible for what sort of threats, which is the threat which they have to. That once that is done, then the rest of it will be a matter of detail. So this first structure will be the one which will have to probably have a CCS note, have to get it approved. So this, unless the CCS note gets approved, you can't make this switch at all. So the CCS note should be the one, and in which all the three chiefs in this case will have to sign on to it. Then only it will be done. The problem is that I think, in my view, from what I see, the Air Force is still not very happy with the fact that it might involve that they are being subordinated when they should not be. There is even a thought process that the centralized planning, which should be how air power should be used, will now get weakened. So all these fears will have to be elevated by the CDS through discussions. That what Bipin Rawat was trying to do. It is not going to be an easy task. So I would think that the committee which you're talking about, which has to work this out, must have a political head, preferably somebody with a military background.
I
If
think
not,
there you, I think there lies the key. The key is not to have any one service who can override the committee,
correct.
right? You need to have the political heft of this country guiding this committee, right? Something like what USA did, right? Uh, right, Goldwater Act, Nichols Goldwater Act.
Yeah,
After all, it was two senators who did it, and they did it in the last century, right? And they went through everything. And the Nichols Goldwater Act, I've read it in great detail. They gave leeway to everyone, and they didn't. They also said when they did this that it's not going to be an easy task, and it's going to be no. We should not be in a hurry. It should be a patient uh, thing which has to happen. It has to unfold itself. And even after that, the US Army struggled for over 2 decades to come to where it is.
correct.
So, right. So this thing with the news which is coming out कि भाई 2024 से लेकर 2025 तक थिएटर कमांड हो जाएंगे, ये थोड़ा मेरे को या ये जो जिस तरीके से आप हंस रहे,
I'm highly skeptical of those
नहीं
time
नहीं
frames, but
आप
let's not take that
देखिए
seriously, because it's
दिस
not going
नहीं
to happen.
नहीं, अगर यहाँ तक अभी खैर ये सब कही सुनी बात है कि ये थिएटर कमांड इस तरीके से आएंगे, ये तो मैं भी कही सुनी बात बोल रहा हूँ। पर अगर ये टाइमलाइन लगा दिया कि 24-25 तक ये थिएटर कमांड नियुक्त हो जाएंगे वगैरह वगैरह वगैरह, हाँ, ये डिसीजन लिया जा सकता है कि भाई 3 थिएटर कमांडर होंगे, इनके यहाँ से लेकर यहाँ तक इनका रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, ये है, मोटा मोटा तौर पर यहाँ तक आ गए तो बहुत है। इसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन मेरे हिसाब से, जैसे आपने भी बताया, एक कमिटी को, इट हैज टू बी ड्रिवन बाय अ कमिटी ओवर द नेक्स्ट 10 to 15 years. इट इज नॉट, मेरे मेरे हिसाब से इट विल नॉट हैपन ओवर 1-2 years. It will happen over the tenure of the next 2 to 3 governments. So you need to have political involvement and the political drive to put this into effect over the longer time. And the worst problem in this is someone shouldn't go into neutral gear in between. Your views, sir.
Yeah, I think, let's not say it's 10 to 15 years. Actually, already since the announcement in 2020 beginning, we have already now passed 3 years stage. And
Yeah,
frankly, we
some have been happened.
yeah, I mean, some integration logistics and all are taking place and all is going on. My point of view is like this, that you first have to institute the basic structure, and then when till you fine tune, the fine tuning process of that structure will, because you can't just move people overnight from one place to another just because now you have made these things. The fine tuning of that should finish in about 5 to 6 years from the time you make the basic structure. I don't think it should take 15 years. Of course, it's always being fine tuned. It will always have things which we learn because we are going into a completely new system. It's not, I quite agree, it's complicated. But if we tell ourselves that 15 years mein hoga, that means in India it won't get done. So that's my larger point.
नहीं नहीं, I agree with you, sir, with the fact that भाई in India you have to say कि भाई कल तक होना चाहिए, तभी होगा 15 साल में. That's a different
No,
story.
I'll tell you what. It's like the point which I made about having a committee with a political head. See, people who are now running the show, the chiefs, CDS, or whatever, there is a show to run now. They are
Yes,
actually so busy in that they don't have the time to think and devote themselves to a matter like this. It must come from people who have the
outside.
experience and outside. There is just, because this requires absolute concentration of energy, consultations, wide consultations amongst a whole lot of people. It cannot be done by people running the show. And you and I, who have actually seen this, I can assure you, unse, it is asking too much of them. So I think that has not been done. It's like, they made a committee of the same people who are running the show to make the national security strategy. That
They
again
can't do it.
is missing in action. So the point is, even if they say, and I think this is just let's say a leak from the, because I'm sure this is a part of a highly classified information, that this sort of things create theater command. But let us take it very optimistically and say ki something is really happening, and that's hope that what is,
No,
because till now it's been a disappointment in the
no.
sense that
This
nothing
what
has
is this
really
has
happened.
come out. What the 3 theater commands have come out. Mr. Nitin Gokhale in Strat News Global has put a map also and shown.
Oh, really?
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, he has. Okay, and so
So,
I have
I
not
mean, he
gone
can
to
be charged under the Official Secrets Act,
well. That's a different story, sir.
which comes from the Command Commanders Conference.
And he's quoted the command commanders, and he said, "Okay, this is the news coming out and all that. We're going to have 3 theater commands." And the timeline also has come from there. Actually, till yesterday, when we were to talk about this theaterization, I was scratching my head. As it is, there's no hair. More was going. Why? What will I talk on theaterization? Right? There's nothing much. But now today we have something to talk of,
No,
and you have a
actually,
time.
the point is there are much larger challenges, especially with human resource management itself, how do we actually, because one of the greatest fears of the minor service, smaller service than thing, is that
They'll get
they'll get
more.
overwhelmed by the army itself. I mean, that's always been there, and therefore that has to be assuaged. The number of CNCs they have, the number of T-stars, that can all be adjusted within this theater system. What is sanctioned can easily be adjusted. It's a matter of actually getting
No,
it done.
I think so. That's only a fear with the other services.
It's a
It's
lower
a
level
matter.
order business, but it's something which affects the behavior of the services. That's what the
Services.
problem is.
Yeah, on that I have no doubt on what you are saying. But I suppose once the whole thing comes into play, people will start adjusting to the fact that look, this is the way things have to go, and you can't. But definitely having 17 theater commands today, I mean not theater commands, 17 commands, individual service commands, is no way of fighting a new war or the next generation war.
And I think there's another issue here. Is see it is natural. It is natural to human behavior that giving up power or turf will always be resisted.
Yeah,
The,
that I
this,
agree.
the problem with the theater command system is that a lot of people will have to give up turf and power to somebody else or in a different form. Now, let's just take the three chiefs. Frankly speaking, in the new system, the three chiefs will definitely have lesser responsibility. Not that they won't have responsibility, they will have a lot of responsibility, but certainly they will have a lesser responsibility than they
Like
have
what they
today.
have today. Yes,
Yeah. So,
there's no
so
doubt about it.
so if you look at human behavior, there would also be a natural resistance from them to give up power, but they don't have a choice now because this has been mandated by the political leadership.
Right.
It is not a question of whether we should have theater commands or not. They have told you that you will have theater commands. Now you decide how it is to be
How?
done. So the problem is you still have arguments saying that theater command is not suitable for us, coming especially advocated from various people, most of them retired from the Indian Air Force. And they're not something which you can ignore because they have a particular way of thinking, they have their logic. But now we have gone beyond that logic. The politician has decided there will be theater command. Now that is therefore not in to be argued nor in question. The question is how. The danger is that if you make compromises and want to still please everybody, then you will come out with a half baked, half cooked structure which might be worse than what we have. That is the
Yeah.
danger. That is what the CDS and the leadership will have to be very, because eventually it is not about them. It is about India's military instrument acquiring greater lethality and effectiveness. That is what it's all about. It's not about Air Force, Navy,
Yeah,
Army.
yeah, that is out.
You
I
know,
mean, I've always maintained that India's military is fit enough to defend its borders in the way we are. If you remember in that last conference, also I made this presentation. The way we are fit enough to defend the integrity and sovereignty of this nation. I don't think there's a doubt about that. But is the current military structure fit enough or good enough to project us to be a regional power, aspiring to be a global power in due course of time, the way we are growing? I don't think so. We need to change, and I think the time for change has come. And if the political hierarchy of this nation has said, look, this much and no more, and we will have theater command, we should get it. On that, I
you see,
have no doubt. But the more
just
the more important point which you have made, sir, I think that's the more important point which I would like to tell everyone is that we should not compromise on issues which matter. We should not. This is not a political, give and take that everyone gets one little bit and the whole loses. Right? That's the very important point you made, and which I thought I must put it across to everyone. In this system, all three services, all three chiefs, all commanders at all levels have to lose something for the nation to gain something. right? That
Absolutely.
I think is the crux of theaterization. If that doesn't happen, we are in trouble. Sorry for
That,
this long-winded talk, sir,
no,
but
no, no.
please.
In fact, if I just take the example of communications between the three services, which
Yes,
are existing today, I mean, that is the manifestation of three services living in their own worlds. And they won't allow entry of another service into their communication system, and it's the other way around. I had this problem when I was in an operational this thing in a command headquarters a long time ago. uh, I mean, I found it ridiculous that we, being the army, could not have a common communication system at that time with the Air Force, and all it could be made up was with bonhomie, good friendship, with jugad, which we are also pretty good at, so that we can actually get the things done. So communications is the key for integration. Now we have grown separately in communication terms, and putting them together is not going to be easy at all. So if anybody is saying 2025 may hoga, then it is just not possible in the way that it can be, that it needs to be done. All this is known, recognized problems. And all of them have got technological solutions. It's not that it cannot be solved, but the fact remains that unless they see this as their role in making an integrated military instrument, unless they see that, unless they can live beyond their own service identity to see a much larger contribution to a larger cause, especially the military leadership, this will not happen very easily. Because that is why I sometimes keep in the lighter vein saying that most of these guys are ex-NDAs, and they seem to have interpreted the NDA motto of service before self, and the service means their individual army, navy, and air force service.
Air
Actually,
Force.
it is service.
Service of the armed forces, yes. So,
Service to the nation. So what I'm saying is, the mindset has it changed. Will the mindset change? Who's going to make the change happen? The politician has already told you your mindset has to change because they've mandated it. The question is whether people down below is now willing to change their mindsets to follow and then implement the instructions which has come. Because I would think that this is the most laudable defense reform which this government has done, because I've been actually a votary of it for a very long time, and I think it's come about, and it will be a pity that if we don't make it happen, at least to the best of our ability. It will never be perfect. It will have a lot of imperfections, but we can learn as we go along. And the need, I don't think we need to say more. The very fact that we have people already at our gates, the very fact that the global geopolitical situation is getting worse, should actually push us to move faster, not saying that it will take its own time. And no, I don't think that should be the attitude by which we approach it. Everybody will have to work as hard as possible. And then the other question which I want to raise is about, you mentioned uh, the Nicholas Act, which the US had.
Goldwater Nichols Act.
Goldwater Nicholas Act. See, I would think in the Indian context, it is better not get into the act because it will create more complications.
No,
It will
I'm not
delay
talking
the
of the.
process. No, no,
I'm
I
not
agree
talking
with you.
of.
I mean, I'm just saying, in the Indian context, it is better not to get there. We can probably think of it much later, but at this point in time, we should not try to get into an act. All we require is a CCS note, which creates the basic structure, and then allows the armed forces to make that transition, because the CCS must empower the armed forces to do that. Because if you don't empower the armed forces to do that, every time you want to move something from somewhere, you'll have to go back to the CCS or the MOD. Then you're finished. So the question
Right.
really is that the CCS note must be very carefully made, which empowers the military leadership to make the adjustments, movement, integration, because you can imagine all the units which are integrated will have to have their WEs and PEs revised, and anybody who's had any experience with revising of these things, it's a Herculean task. It's not going to be easy. So, but it'll have to be done. But therefore, in the MOD, it must be processed by the DMA and not by what it has been done now. So this
Yeah.
particular task must be done here. So there are a whole lot of things which you can actually think of, but speeding up we must attempt. I agree, it will take time. There is no way that this can be uh, just done by an order. No, I agree it will take time, and therefore I would say my 5 year this thing is to make that happen. If in India, as you said, 15 years means Ogani. It's like that. It's like that committee which General Sundarji ordered after Blue Star, and uh, he, you know, he's there was this thing about wanting to move all the regiments, infantry, artillery, and armored
Yeah.
corps, all India class, and that committee decided that we will do it in 15 years. Then that is the end of that
Yeah,
story.
I
So I
agree with
think
you, sir. I agree with you. The laying down of this timeline to 2025 has some value because it shows you why you have to go there. And once you go there, you have no choice. You don't get a choice to get back. So, to that extent, I am with you. And I'm also of the opinion, I mean, we have no doubt in our mind that this is a necessity. It is a necessity of the day. And this necessity of the day was felt 20 years back when we fought the Kargil War. You're now hitting a quarter century back. From then to now, we've been hibernating, and we've come out with it. We have no choice actually but to go back. And as Indians, whenever we are put in a corner, we tend to do well, and I have that hope of success rather than the fear of failure with me that we'll do well. Right.
I
So
have
we'll
a
take on
point.
some, we'll take on some questions. Sir. You
Yeah,
tell your
can I
point and
just
then I'll take. Yeah.
I have a point. One point I want to make. You see, don't forget that this was not an initiative of the Ministry of Defense. It was initiative of the Prime Minister's office,
Yes.
and therefore it overrode all bureaucratic military resistance to this move, and it
Yes.
couldn't only have been done like that. Now that resistance doesn't die away. It now will surface as the implementation goes on, and therefore I'm saying that without political oversight, without
Oh, I
push
think.
and monitoring, it will not happen so easily.
I think, I mean, I have faith in our prime minister that he'll push it through. That is on that I have not had a doubt, and I am also privy to the fact that certain things in the CCS note on the creation of the CDS and the DMA and all, where it is at his instance or at his insistence. After everything got approved and when it went to him, he said, "This is what changes," and end of story. And after that, it is what it is. So we'll leave it at that, sir. It's today, like I want to tell everyone, uh, I do know this was an unstructured talk. I do know that this is a complicated talk. For many of you, many things would have gone overhead, right? But today is the first, the tee off on this 9 whole course which we have to take, right? As we go along and as theaterization unfolds, we will be coming back to you with probably better, more experts to explain the nuts and bolts of each situation as it unfolds. And this is part of a public debate which we have started so that the public also knows what it is. Informed people also have a second view about what they're doing, right? And there is a view from the veteran community to what the whole thing is all about. And let me tell you, the best part of being a veteran is when you're not saddled by the day to day hustle bustle of work, you think more and some good ideas come up. And it is time that these good ideas are put to use. It's not necessary that, people like General Menon and I, who are far down the line, are called back. But those who have just retired, who are still in the know of things, need to be made to contribute, right? And I'm sure they will do it. With this, sir, can I take on a few questions?
Please.
Right, right. Karthik, thanks a lot. He says, I have a question. Which arm should get priority in theaterization? And also, how to decide which are to lead in West, East, and South? Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the question of lead will only depend, it cannot be decided in the abstract. It has to be decided in the context. Now, let's say there is a Western continental theater. Let's say that there is a Western continental theater. And there is a Northern continental theater, which is land boundary. I would think that the Western theater should actually be headed by the Air Force for the simple reason that one of the main operational
Components.
effective part would be that we should be able to strike without posturing and as fast as possible, and those would involve implements which can be air based, can be land based, but since that this is the nature of the action that we have to take, although we could all we it would also might involve limited land offensive limited, I would think that this can be given to the Air Force. And as far as the Northern Theater is concerned, and that Air Force guy will have a deputy CNC theater commander who can be from the Army. And as far as the the
Western.
Northern one is concerned, it could be it should be from the Army because the continental nature, and the deputy CNC can be from the Air Force. But this is only an initial this thing in the beginning. To say that this is therefore earmarked forever is not what we should do, because if we, as long as there is no earmarking, that the person suitable can always be there, because at that level it all depends upon the what do you call, the skill and the reputation of that person who's been there. He should not be held back from being northern theater commander because he's from the Air Force. It should not be, it's not be, there should be no ban. So this is a matter which should be flexible. But the initial one, I would say that you could privilege Air Force with the Western, and Army with the North. And of course, the maritime theaters will have to be commanded by the Navy initially, and depending upon what the context is, the two ICs, the deputy CNC can be decided from the Air Force or the Army. But these are
So,
lower order issues. They are not the main issues at
yeah.
all. They are.
Actually,
They should not
what?
take us. They should not take us from creating the theater command. These are things which will flow over a period of time. There will be problems because obviously every service would want its own CNC be there, but it's not a showstopper at all.
Right. That's a interesting thing which you put up, Crosser. In fact, the critical point is the man who heads the theater should be the most capable. It is not from a particular service. It is not from a particular color of uniform or not. Right. At this point of time, we don't have the joint structures where an army person goes and commands Air Force, or he has got that kind of interaction with the Air Force setup or the naval setup for him to demonstrate skills in joint service operations. This will be built up over a period of time. Initially, it could be, I mean, like General Prakash Menon has said that West should be, the theater commander could be Air Force, the Northern should be land, and someone might have a different view, but that's a matter of debate. That's a matter of debate, and that is someone else will decide about it. We can all put our points of view across, right? But we should have the best three theater commands in India who will deliver for the nation. That's the thing, right? Karan Khanna, sir, for theater commands to materialize, the interforce turf wars need to be overcome first, and the complex man machine and departmental integration.
No, I couldn't get that question. Could you please repeat it?
Yeah, so he's saying that for theater commands to materialize, the interforce, inter-service, turf wars need to be overcome, right?
Okay.
And the complex man-machine and departmental integration needs to be done.
Right. All this is about how the military, the higher level of military leadership, handles this issue. If they are becoming part of the problem, then what are they going to do? They're going to hold this up, because finally, as you rightly said, it is about redistributing power. It's about redistributing turf. It is, and that's why I'm saying that the military leadership must know that nobody owns anything. Everything is owned by the government of India for a national cause. You are a temporary custodian of that asset, and that asset, depending upon where it is needed, can be used, and you can't say ki ye mera hai,
Yeah,
unless you change that. And that's a mindset thing. Unless you change that mindset among the military leadership, these tough battles will be difficult to resolve.
right, sir. Here's a very simple question. Sir, is a war with China inevitable in this decade?
Yeah, I think this is a question which is out of syllabus to this discussion. So,
But that's okay, sir,
and
because
I'm
since we're
not an
talking,
astrologer either.
no,
I
no,
don't think
that's
anybody
okay.
can possibly answer that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's only an astrologer who might even make an attempt. I as a retired guy, would definitely not.
Well, sir, let's put it this way. With a war with China in this decade being inevitable, uh, is not on the cards, right? The inevitability is not on the cards. Will a war happen with China? Might happen with China. But will friction happen with China? It will happen with China. Because as two growing nations or two growing powers, right, next to each other with a contested boundary and undemarcated, even the LAC is not undemarcated. So there is going to be friction. And this friction will lead to intermittent problems. And these problems are going to be largely in the gray zone. So we
No,
should
but
be prepared.
let me just say, as far as the armed forces are concerned, their only bread and butter is to be prepared for war.
Yeah,
I mean, they can't depend upon diplomacy and politicians to keep war out of this. Please don't have that. Your
yeah,
bread and butter is to prepare. The question the military leadership has to answer is, what sort of wars should you be prepared, and how should we be prioritized? That is a question of military strategy, of the intellectual process by which you prepare the armed forces for war. That's what the higher defense organization should do. Those are the instructions which they must give, and that is for them to think through. But even when you do that, just be, one thing, you will be surprised. You should be ready to be surprised. When you are surprised, then the question is, how will you react to the surprise and get back and make the best of it? That is what military leaders do. It doesn't matter what China is going to do, China is not going to do. That is not our concern, because we are not in control. Neither is anybody else in control in this country. But the
yeah.
bread and butter is to prepare for war.
Yeah, we need to prepare for war rather than think a lot of things. So in case eventuality occurs, we should be prepared to handle it. Right, sir. I'll stop with this because I don't see many questions on theaterization. Right, and there are some opinions which I think at this point of time are too. What shall I say? You know, stem from the haziness of this subject, because this, like I said earlier, this is a very complicated subject. When General Prakash Menon said, I'll take on theaterization," I readily agreed to it, knowing fully well that this is a very complex subject. This is not a simple subject, right? We've just put across to you the outlines of what theaterization is and what complications are. Like I had said earlier, we will, as the whole story unfolds, as government instructions start coming out, as news reports start coming out, filtering out, we will discuss this in due course of time and give you a very clear idea as to where things are going. With this, sir, I must thank you for coming on to Ghana Shot and expressing your views so clearly and putting across your point of view, which you have, you know, is based on research, and you have also written articles and papers about it. which I've read, and that is why I said, okay, let's. In fact, I read the whole lot of them today again before you spoke, so that I could also be up to speed. Right. Thanks a lot, sir, and thanks a lot to all those who have attended. I'm not taking all your questions because I don't think at this point of time some of the issues which you have raised need to be answered. Uh, just take it from me. In due course, I will answer them. That I'll promise you. Right. First, absorb the subject. Understanding the subject is more important than asking questions about it. Right. Thank you. Good evening and Jai Hind.
Thank you.